The Nodachi is a fascinating weapon, and since I own one myself, I've been trying to understand and research how to use one. In this video we will discuss three main points. We will talk about what a Nodachi is and how it was carried, as this question already came up a few months ago and I did do some extensive research on this matter. We will talk how certain Kenjutsu styles, and to be specific we will examine two Kenjutsu styles that focus on the usage of Nodachi, and we will see how they use them. And it's interesting because these two styles use the Nodachi in two completely different ways. And thirdly, I will examine a clip or a video about a world record with a Nodachi. A few of you have actually asked me to talk about, because some people say that that's a Nodachi but other people say that it's a nagamaki. So I will tell you my opinion on that. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is the Metatron speaking. So, point number one. What is a Nodachi? Well, we do know that a Nodachi is basically a longer version of the Japanese tachi. So, if you look at a Nodachi, it looks like a longer katana. We do have to notice also that the handle itself tends to be longer than that of a normal katana, even if we look at proportions only. But I think the most important difference that a lot of people don't talk about when talking about the difference between katana and Nodachi is not really the length itself, but the usage. The Nodachi is a battlefield weapon only, differently from the katana. The katana is the sort of weapon that you would carry with you, and of course they were also used in battle, but they were a secondary, if not even the third weapon that a samurai would wield. But if the samurai was in town, he would be wearing a katana. The Nodachi instead is more similar to polearms like the naginata or the yari. It's a battlefield weapon only, a weapon that was designed for usage in battle. So how do you carry a Nodachi? Well, I did talk briefly about this and how I sort of brought up some hypotheses, but now I have actual data. There are three ways to carry a Nodachi, historically speaking. The first one is carrying it by hand. Transportation is easier this way, and it's also easier to draw it. Because if you put your Nodachi and you carry it at the waist like a normal regular katana or tachi, it would be very difficult to draw one, if not impossible, depending on the size, as size limitations are not that specific, which means that there are several possibilities of length of blade within the Nodachi world. There are shorter Nodachi and longer Nodachi. If we consider the longest possible, which is basically the one I have, which is the longest Nodachi you can get, unless of course we talk about ceremonial Nodachi like this one here, but this was never used in actual combat. If we consider Nodachi that would be used in actual combat, then if you consider the longest one, it would be impossible to draw one from the waist if you were to wear them like you would a katana. Furthermore, in the Muromachi period, there was a trend of having your followers or your servants help you draw one. So they would be pulling the scabbard or the saya from behind as you would perform the draw. But the second way to carry a Nodachi would probably be the one that you find mostly interesting, and it is on the back. Yes, I found proof. I actually found not only mentions, but there is this Edo period woodblock print which shows clearly a samurai carrying some sort of polearm and wearing a Nodachi on the back. It seems though that this was not as popular, as it would be impossible to draw it directly from the back, and of course it could be possible to just remove it and draw it, but apparently it was considered more effective to simply carry one. But this was a historical possibility. So when we see in games like Way of the Samurai 3 the character wearing a Nodachi like this, yes, it is actually feasible. But the third way to carry a Nodachi is what is going to link us to the second part of this video, and it is indeed wearing it on the hips or on the waist as a katana. But the thing is that you could only do it with shorter Nodachi, and there is a whole Kenjutsu style, or Yaijutsu style as well, they also do Yaido, which is focused on this. We are talking about the Enshin Ryu. The Enshin Ryu is the style that focuses on being able to draw a Nodachi quickly. So it's focusing on quick draws, but with Nodachi. That's badass if you ask me. as we examine the way they move, they use a Nodachi in a very similar way to how you would use a katana. Sometimes they even use it with one hand, and they cut with it in a very similar way to the way you would cut with a katana. Perhaps the only difference that I can see by looking at the clips that I could find on YouTube about this style is that it seems that they mostly focus on cuts coming from above, and I don't see many rising cuts that you would have with a katana. This is the only statement in this video that I'm not 100% sure about, but for what I've seen, that appears to be the case. Enshin Ryu focuses on a technique to draw the Nodachi effectively. This technique is based on the idea of pulling the scabbard back rather than actually drawing the sword in order to make it possible to draw such a long bladed weapon. Now, this is not a technique unique to this style, but this is the only style that actually uses it and applies this technique to a Nodachi, as all other Kenjutsu styles that use this technique still use it on a katana. There is a second Ryu that I would like, a second school of Kenjutsu that I would like to share with you in this video, and it's the Jigan Ryu. Jigan Ryu is entirely focused on the usage of Nodachi. What's interesting is that they are focused on preemptive attacks and cuts from the top. As a matter of fact, they only use the Nodachi with a Jodan no Kamae, or a higher stance, which you can see it's still slightly different from the way you would perform a Jodan no Kamae with an actual katana. So this is again a battlefield oriented style. It's a brutal style if you compare it to other styles. They focus on cutting down as many targets as possible, trying to keep the momentum of the sword. In both styles though, Enshin Ryu and Jigan Ryu, one thing that I noticed to be common is the idea of using a Nodachi against an opponent wielding a polearm, for example a naginata. I find this to be significant because for what we read and what we find in most documents talking about Nodachi, we know that Nodachi were used as an anti-cavalry weapon, so a weapon used to cut down the horses or the horses' legs in order to then kill the horseman. But here in these styles we see a second way of using the weapon, and that is to defeat polearms. And I think it could make sense because the Nodachi itself is basically almost a polearm. And this is why, out of these two styles, I would be more interested in learning the second one, the Jigan Ryu. They use the Nodachi differently from the way a katana is used because they are very different. And for what I could try so far, and I refer you to my earliest video where I talked about the Nodachi. When I first bought a Nodachi, I tried to use it a little bit, and I tried some Kenjutsu stances, for example, and even though I completely ignored this, just as my feeling as a swordsman, I noticed that although before using the Nodachi I would have thought that a Gedan no Kamae or low guard would have been the easiest one to use the Nodachi with, I actually changed my mind because wielding one, I noticed that Jodan no Kamae, or the highest stance, is the Kamae or stance that I find more natural. And again, noticing that there is a whole style now that focuses only on Jodan no Kamae or higher stance confirms that this feeling that I had was indeed correct. We do have to put this into perspective. You don't have to imagine 4 modern day Japanese people screaming as they hit wood with a wooden sword. You need to imagine this in a battlefield. You need to imagine these fully armed samurai running towards each other with these very long blades, screaming and trying to cut each other into pieces. Last but not least, we will talk now about this video where people ask me, is this a Nodachi or is this a nagamaki? So let's watch a little bit of the clip together. Okay, now the cut was impressive, I have to say. I think it's like 24 mats, and that's an achievement, absolutely. So the cut was performed very well. But looking at this, I might be wrong, but I think it is a nagamaki. This is not a Nodachi. A Nodachi, although again the length of the blade varies, the difference in proportion, the ratio between the handle and the blade should be 1/3. So yes, you do have longer handles, but in this case it's quite obvious, it's 50-50. When it's a 50% handle, 50% blade, then we will have a nagamaki. This, in my eyes, is no doubt a nagamaki. Even the way he uses it is completely different to the styles of Kenjutsu we have seen together. He uses it like the way a nagamaki would be used, using a rotatory movement and cutting from the side. Alright, noble ones, I hope that you enjoyed this brief video, this brief moment we spent together talking about swords. Please let me know which one of these two Kenjutsu styles would you be more interested in learning if you were to wield a Nodachi yourself. Please let me know in the comments below. And remember, the Metatron has spread his wings. Goodbye.